Okay, so today we're going to be discussing polynomial division, and we'll begin with the following example. We'll be needing to divide polynomials throughout this course to find factors of the polynomial. So it's a necessary skill for us to learn. So I'll begin with the following. Let's say I have a negative 3x to the squared plus 2x to the third plus 8x minus 12, and I would like to divide it by x minus 1. Okay? First of all, as we notice here, this is a squared and this is a third power. This is to the 1, and here is the constant term. So we know it's a third degree polynomial. When you divide polynomials, you must put them in order, descending order. So the third would go first, the second would go second, the first, and so forth. And the process that is shown, demonstrated in the book, would be to write it like this. So I would have a 2x to the third minus 3x squared plus 8x minus 12 divided by x minus 1. Okay? Now you would divide this just like you would divide normal, as if you were dividing normal numbers. So you ask yourself, what do I need to multiply x minus 1 by in order to get 2x to the third minus 3x? I want to get as close to this as I can. So it looks to me that I would divide it by 2x squared. And I will write that 2x squared here, so as to keep my x squareds in a column. You'll see that the x squareds will go down in a column, the x's will go down in a column, and the constant terms will go down in a column. Okay, and so now what we want to try and do, notice I'm taking the x and multiplying it by 2x squared. So x times 2x squared is going to be 2x to the third. Because, as we know, I'll write over here, x times 2x squared equals 2x to the third. Yes? And that's what we're trying to get. We're trying to actually equal this number. And I also must multiply this term, the negative 1, by the same factor. So negative 1 times 2x squared is going to be a negative 2x squared. Okay? Now at this point you must take this factor here and subtract it from these terms here. So in order to subtract, I could change the sign of both of these and add, or I could just say this minus this. Oops, this is a third right there. This minus this is 0, and so they cancel. 3x squared, a negative 3x squared minus a negative 2x squared. So minus a negative 2x squared is going to be, I can change that to a positive, because remember, minus a negative, and I'll write this up over here. For example, if I have a negative 3x squared minus a negative 2x squared, I can see that I've got a negative 3x squared. These will become pluses, and so I get a negative x squared. So negative 3x squared plus 2x squared is a negative x squared. And so I get a negative x squared. Alright? And so the idea here, let us go through this again. I must choose a factor here to multiply by the first factor here, so that when I multiply them together, these factors are equivalent. When they're equivalent, they will cancel out when I do subtraction. Okay? Then I go ahead and proceed along and multiply this term by that factor again, write it here, and subtract again and write here. Now at this point I must drop the next term into line here. So the positive 8x must be dropped for a positive 8x. And now I repeat. And so I ask myself, what can I multiply the x by in order to equal a negative x squared? And I see that I must multiply it by a negative x. A negative x times a positive x is a negative x squared, and I have the exact same thing. And remember that I also must multiply these two by each other, so a negative 1 times a negative x is a positive x. Alright, now since these are a negative x squared minus a negative x squared, negative x squared minus a negative x squared, notice is 0. And so these cancel again. Now I've got 8x minus x, or 8x minus a positive x. Remember, you're always subtracting here, or you could change the sign. Some people do that, but we'll subtract. So 8x minus x is equal to a 7x, as you can see there. And so I write down 7x. And then again, I must drop the next term for a negative 12. And so I ask myself, what do I need to multiply x by in order to equal a 7x? Well, x times 7, a positive 7, so I'll multiply it by a positive 7, and x times a positive 7 will give me a 7x. And then a positive 7 times a negative 1 will give me this. Remember, this times this will give me, let's see, a negative 7. And now again, I must subtract here. 7x minus 7x is nothing. You'll notice that if every time you should get nothing here, and then a negative 12 minus a negative 7. Negative 12 minus a negative 7 is equal to a negative 12 plus 7, or leaving me a 5. So I'm left with a 5 here. Alright, and that will do it. So in the end, this is the answer right there, or this is the quotient. Here I have the remainder. Quotient right there. Here's the remainder right there. This actually was the dividend, which is the thing that I started with here. The thing that I started with, this is the dividend, and this over here is the divisor right here. Okay, and so in the end you can present your answer like this: the dividend divided by the divisor, the dividend divided by the divisor is equal to the quotient plus the remainder divided by the divisor. And this formula right there is maybe something that you can write down in your notes for future reference. It's actually quite a nice formula. And so as I present my answer, remember the beginning question was the dividend here divided by the divisor. So I'll write it as the dividend, 3x squared, that's a negative. I'll write it so that the x to the third term is in the beginning again. So I'll write 2x to the third minus 3x squared plus 8x minus 12 divided by, I'll use a fraction bar, x minus 1 is equal to, this is the answer. And we pull the answer from the top here. And so the answer is, let's see, 2x squared minus x plus 7. And then we also have another term, plus the remainder. Remainder in this case is 5. And the the divisor goes here, x minus 1. And so this is the result right there. Okay? And there we have it. That's all of it right there. You can kind of see in the camera there. So there is dividing polynomials.